cusp of providing the same for GPU and graphics performance. Here to tell us more about this is Kevin Cook of Liquidware Labs. Please welcome your presenter.
Come on! Good, thank you. How you guys doing today? Good show? My name is Kevin Cook. I'm a product director with Liquidware Labs. I focus on Stratosphere, a product that is designed to quantify, help trend, monitor, and diagnose user experience in virtual workload type environments. That's how you can get in touch with me if you care to do so. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about Liquidware Labs, but more importantly what we're doing with NVIDIA in terms of looking at GPU metrics and how those are impactful to the user experience through that user lifecycle management approach that we take. So we've been an alliance partner with NVIDIA for some time now. We are a platform vendor that supports user environment management, visibility, and application layering, regardless of how that Windows workload is delivered, whether it's on physical, virtual, cloud, VMware, Centric. We're completely agnostic to the delivery approach. As long as it's a Windows-based workload, all of the technologies and approaches that I'll talk about here today will apply. With respect to that life cycle I spoke about, most individuals and most customers that we work with go through a fairly standard or typical process when they're converting physical workloads or physical PC workloads to the virtual world. They start on that inner circle, and typically they'll begin with some type of an assessment. They'll then design some type of infrastructure or infrastructure platform, choose an architecture. They'll go through a proof of concept or a pilot, and then they start to migrate their users over. Ultimately, they'll validate those users, and then we move to the outside circle where we're looking at more of an operational approach. They monitor, they diagnose, inevitably they troubleshoot problems. And if they're smart, they also do periodic health checks and they look to optimize their environment. We support that entire life cycle. So although we may be referred to as a monitoring product, we really do much, much, much more. So as it relates to scaling end user workloads, there's a number of key things that I wanted to make sure you understood about Liquidware Labs. First, Stratosphere employs very much a user-centric approach. So unlike other infrastructure or application performance management-oriented products, we look at the user's experience and the performance of the VM that the user is employing first, and then time correlate that with the infrastructure outside of it second, which is sort of exact opposite of how a traditional infrastructure monitoring product might work. This gives us a true measure of what that user is experiencing. And if there are problems or constraints, we can identify and show you in the supporting infrastructure where that may be happening. It also allows us to do a before and after. Now this becomes interesting when we talk about GPU, because we can look at what the user experience was prior, perhaps, to adding GPU offload to your host infrastructure, and then measure it again after, and show how that GPU may have affected or created an increase in the user experience overall. As I said, this user experience metric is something that we actually quantify. It's based on machine indicators and I/O indicators, and together it forms a metric that we can trend over time and look at by user, by machine, by application, by geography, and really look at that information to help you to perform all of those things in the life cycle, whether it's optimizing, performing a health check, validating an infrastructure change, looking at scalability, or simply monitoring or diagnosing problems. And again, so at the end of the day, that's going to help you ensure you're meeting your business goals, but more importantly, in terms of your infrastructure, making sure you are accountable to those hardware changes and those hardware investments and tying them back to the user experience. So with respect to end user workloads, we talked about the user-centric approach. We talked about how you can use this to check your architecture to avoid issues, validate your image design and the applications that you place into that image, and ultimately find and identify constraints. So how does this all relate to GPU, right? We talked about at the beginning that there are a number of key steps in the process. I'm going to talk about 3 of them here today. We're going to start with assessment. Now, assessment is important for a number of key reasons. First, assessment is important because it's what helps you to understand what the core infrastructure needs to be. Without performing an assessment, you really have no idea how much of a RAM pool, how much CPU, how much IOPS, what your network fabric might need to look like to support the workloads of your physical PC. mentioned it briefly, but the second important aspect of the assessment is to gather the information to be able to have an image design that meets the majority of your users. And of course, at the end of the day, it's all about those applications. So whether we're talking about VDI, whether we're talking about streamed applications, whether we're talking about hosted applications or perhaps a Zen app type of an environment, knowing who's using it, what they're consuming, when they're using it, these are all very, very important considerations when you look at building that infrastructure. And of course, GPU is now emerging to be a very important component of all of that. The last reason that assessment is really important is about baselining and identifying normal. If you don't determine what people are doing before you move them to the virtual environment, you have no means to compare and ensure you're delivering an equal or better user experience after you're done. So these are the three key areas from an assessment standpoint. How does that relate back to our product and ultimately what we're doing, working very closely with NVIDIA? So what you see here is what we call our fit profile. This is fitness profile. It helps to determine the fitness or how well a physical PC might translate to that virtual environment. And today you see we have things like CPU load, user load, memory load, GDI or graphics intensity, whether you've got 1 or 2 monitors. And we have the ability to filter out applications if you're running a particular application that may opt you out, right? But this is a whitelist exercise. We have to go through and define these things either through trial and error or best practices. What's really exciting about what we're doing with NVIDIA is we're starting to look and peel back the actual metrics, the actual components that we can measure, and how those metrics are starting to become indicators for crafting a gold image. It's my hope that at some point in the not too distant future, it won't really matter about how many monitors you have. It'll matter about what your total GPU consumption is, and whether you decide based on the consumption what is the ratio of users that you'd like to put on a particular host. So today we've got these exclusionary kinds of whitelist exercises, but the efforts that we're doing with NVIDIA are actually going to help us take this much, much further and have a more analytical-based approach. Similarly, with Stratosphere today, you'll see that same fitness score. We also have a user experience score based on slightly different metrics. This is an indicator of how a user is actually experiencing that individual virtual machine, whether they're happy and their expectations are being met. Here you'll see that I can look at machines in an aggregate over a 30-day period. I can show what their GPU core used, what different attributes in terms of GPU overall is being used. Why this is interesting is I can actually go in and perform a bit of an inventory assessment of my GPUs and now look at all of the individual GPUs we've recognized and how many of the individual users in my total environment may be using that. So today, again, more of a whitelist type of exercise where I can simply count up and with my NVIDIA engineer determine, well, if I've got 9 of these and 10 of those, how does that perhaps translate to more of a grid-centric infrastructure? As we move forward and work more closely with NVIDIA, this will be translated into a more quantitative approach. The second area I wanted to talk about, there were 3, recall, the second area I want to talk about is about first-tier operations and the help desk type of function. So today you can see that we have these high-level dashboards and the ability to provide trendable information. Here you're looking at a refresh period of time, and you can see that we've got dashboards around host utilization for CPU, for memory, and I/O. We're very close and on the cusp now with the help and the work that we're doing at NVIDIA to be able to show GPU. And GPU in a number of key areas, right? So with the work that we're doing with NVIDIA, we'll be able to look at things like encode utilization, decode utilization, 3D graphics utilization, overall frame buffer utilization. We're going really quantum leaps beyond what we have visibility and the ability to expose to you all today in a very short period of time. It's very, very exciting. Similarly, as it relates to operations, you'll see we've got the ability to create validation reports. I talked a little bit before about before and after. So with Stratosphere UX, we can allow you to run a validation report, choose a period of time, perhaps 30 days prior to installing a GPU card in a host, measure what the utilization or what all of these individual user experience metrics were for that 30-day period of time, install your card, run it again 30 days after, and we'll actually show a report of the user experience again by group, by application, by geography, by any really metric that you choose to lump or group those information groups together. Alerting. So also part of that operations first tier support, alerting. You'll see today we can alert based on things like CPU, based on ready states, based on memory consumption. We will very soon be able to add GPU metrics. Perhaps when an individual consumes more than what's allocated for them, perhaps when we see the overall grid card becoming more utilized than it should, great indicators to indicate either you've got too many folks on a server or maybe not enough folks on a server, but overall the visibility and how we're translating that visibility into actionable steps that you can take to optimize your environment. We're coming very, very far down that path with the work we're doing with NVIDIA. So lastly, diagnostics, and in my opinion, the hardest thing to do. The pretty dashboards are easy, but really when things go awry, how do you drill down and figure out what's truly wrong from a root causality standpoint? So today, what I'll show you is this is looking at a 60-day period of time, an individual machine, and we're looking at it at a resolution by day, hour. So you'll see right here I've got all of the different day hours for this particular machine. This particular machine happens to be running a Grid K1. I can show you what the overall fitness score and user experience score is. But more importantly, I'm now going in and showing you trendable information about GPU core, memory, thermal temperature, so you understand the ebbs and flows of what's going on. If there's a spike, we would be able to drill down into some of these and see even sub-hour granularity. A lot of information to really help diagnose, troubleshoot, and then ultimately remediate these infrastructures. Another view, this one is looking at GPU by application type. So now we're looking at all of the applications that were run over a 14-day period. We're looking at the number of users and machines that ran each of those applications, and we're starting to get a little bit of information now about how that information relates and ties back to individual processes. So again, very, very, very exciting things coming down the pipe with the work that we're doing with NVIDIA. Very exciting for those looking to design, ultimately monitor, manage, and operationalize these platforms and be able to take some of these graphics-intensive workloads off of the CPU. With that, I would welcome you to come by our booth, take a look at what we've got going on. We'd love to talk to you more about it, but if you have any questions, I'd love to take them.
Thank you, Kevin. Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Cook, Liquidware Labs. Give him a round of applause. Fantastic presentation. He'll be around for just a minute or so to answer some questions.
Absolutely.
If you want to do those directly.